Hey folks, so we are back again with our Hoop Sisters quilts. So as you remember, last time we stitched out block 1. This month we're doing block 2. So as you can see here, I have my beautiful block 2 all stitched out, and we're going to do one together here in just a moment. So if you did not see month 1 video, I would really recommend going in back to it, because I go over quite a few things that we're not going to cover on this video that I would just kind of assume that you know at this point. I'm also going to be doing the month 3 video next. So this will be block 3. So as you can see, so we have already done block 1. And we are going to be again doing block 3 next. I'm also, for the next video that is going to be posted in here, if you're following in the exact order, I'm going to talk about piecing the 2 blocks together and the 2 top blocks together to create the 4 patch for your one of your optional layouts. So of course there are 2 block layouts. There is one with a butterfly block and one without. Depending on which way you're doing it will dictate the amount of squares that you're going to make. And I wanted to just show you, so she also will every month give you like other layout possibilities. So this is another layout possibility available to you. But this is the block we're doing today. So again, as always, you can make 4 blocks to make this layout, or you can make 1 block to do the butterfly layout. So depending on which size you're doing, it's going to dictate exactly what you need. So there are 5 fabrics in total. So if we look here, there is my background, which I'm using the same background through the entirety of it. I'm using my purple, my pink, my orange, and my green. So that's my 5. So your cutting instructions will be here based off your hoop size. So if you're doing the 4x4, like it's not the 4x4, but if you're doing the 5-inch blocks or if you're doing the 8-inch blocks, it will dictate what size piece you need. So just keep that in mind. The other notions that she recommends, so especially if you're doing the version where you were adding the back to it, I would highly recommend that you get the Vanish Light. And then, of course, I've got my embroidery bobbin thread. I've got my polyester embroidery threads over there ready to go. I have, of course, an orange, a pink, and a purple to match my fabrics, and a green to match or contrast how I will. And I am using the same the same thread for my piecing and my quilting throughout. So for anybody that wants to know, I do use exquisite thread, and that is what I prefer. And if you ever want a color list, you can ask me here in the store, but I do have it listed here. So for my cream color that I'm quilting with, that is exquisite ES 165. The green is ES 983. The pink is ES 309. The orange is ES 649, and the purple is ES 392. Just for anybody that wants to use the same color as I have. But anyway, moving on. So at my machine, I already have the design loaded. So we're going to be making another one of these blocks, because I am doing both layouts, and we'll cover how to put it all together sooner or later in the series. But again, we have already done block 1, and if you've not watched the video for that yet, I do ask that you please do that before you continue on to block 2. It is best if you're watching at least the blocks in order, not so much the sewing videos, but try to watch the blocks in order. So, and again, I'll be doing block 3 next. So let's dive into it. So I'm going to, forgive me as I kind of pan the tablet over to the machine. So as you'll see here, I have 3 of my threads, and up here I have my other 2. So I already have my stabilizer hooped. We again are using a no-show mesh, so just a very thin mesh stabilizer. I really like the Floriani from R&K Distributing, their power mesh stabilizer. It is my personal favorite. I also have a piece of batting right here. So this is a cotton poly blend, or you can use what the Hoop Sisters manufacturers recommend is a product called Battleizer, and you can buy packages of those, and if that's the way you want to do it, you would actually just hoop the Battleizer as opposed to having stabilizer and batting, because what Battleizer is a batting with stabilizer in it. As you can see here, I've got my design pulled up, and based off of the size, I am doing the 8x8, and I've got it ready to go. So we have centered our batting into our hoop. I'm doing the 8x8, so I have on a 9x9 square, and as you can see here, I do have my fabrics cut into strips ready to go for the project. So first things first, we have our design loaded, we've got our stabilizer hooped, we've got our batting on, and now we are ready to sew. So we're going to lower the foot and we're going to start. Oh, one other notion I should have mentioned that I would recommend having on hand at all times, other than your embroidery trimming scissors, is some embroidery tape. I really like, again, R&K Distributing's Embroidery Perfection tape. It is one that I've used for years. OESD also makes their own tape. Kimberbell makes her own tape. Tons of different companies out there make an embroidery tape. I like it because it has no acetone, so it's not going to hurt my fabrics. It's not going to leave residue, and it's safe to sew through. So, for what that's worth. Now, there is an option here where you can add an additional piece of wool batting, and you're going to see that in the instructions, I believe. Let me check here real quick so I am not telling you incorrectly. Okay, it is on, I've stapled my instructions all backwards together somehow, some way. I don't know what I've done, y'all, so bear with me. I want to make sure I'm telling you the correct step. Okay, there we go. So it is in the instruction is on step 2, where they talk about if you were doing the additional wool. So we would have put that down right now after we've done the initial step, or you will actually skip the next step. So it's machine stitch step 2, which does a zigzag stitch all the way around to kind of hold the wool, the extra piece of wool batting. I personally am not a fan of wool batting. Nothing against it for anybody that does, it's just not for me. So I'm going to skip right on past that step, and I am going to trim the batting down. Now, you can do this at the end of each step, like when the block is all done. She has a ruler that she recommends, which is called the Trimmer by George. And we just got one in, so I will do a video demoing how to use it at some point. But I promise that I'm making several blocks, and that at one point or another, I promise before this series is over with, I will demo that. And it really won't matter too much, because I think your guys are going to get access to all these videos at the same time. But I do like to trim my batting ahead of time. That's a me thing. And don't forget, if you need to take this off, just slide it off your machine and trim. And I trim very close to the batting. And the reason I like to do this is I do not trust myself to go back and thin this out. And I get my seams very bulky, and I'm a big fan of consistency, so I like to do the same thing the same way every single time. So once we've done that, we're going to slide it back in, and this is where you would choose if you're going to lay down the extra piece of batting or not. If you are, great. If not, skip the step, and we're going to hit our lower button, and we're going to start, and this is going to actually be machine stitch step 3. So it is going to stitch the outline of the entire block directly onto your batting. So I am using batik, so I'm cheating a little bit because batiks are a little more forgiving than other fabrics on having a right or wrong side. So just like with paper piecing, standard foundation paper piecing, you will go ahead and put your first piece of fabric down face side up. But on everything else, you are going to put face side down to start with. So we're doing a technique that is commonly referred to as flip and fold. If you watched again the previous video, I'm sure I covered all of that there. Okay, we're about done. So even though we're about to put purple on, I'm going to keep the same thread on until we get done to the quilting area. And I'm using my polyester bobbin, my standard polyester bobbin all the way through. So we have our initial outline area, which is right here in the center. And I'm just going to take my piece of fabric that I've pre-cut for this. I overextend it beyond the top and the side just a little bit, and I cover all the stitching inside the parameters. So once I've covered all that, I lower my foot, I hit start, and I just like to make sure I cover everything. Perfect. So I did not trim in this corner because I was scared of cutting my edge off, because as you can see, sometimes it doesn't want to stitch right there. I'm going to pull that back out and kind of pull that closer to where you guys can see that it has not stitched for me a single time I have sewn this out. And this is the 5th block I've made of this, so just keep that in mind. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just trim away. Sorry if my arms are in the way, but I gotta cuts it down. But I'm going to leave this spot right up here at the top where it did not stitch. So if you've got it where the hoop is, it's right here at this top portion. So let's just trim close to the stitch line, but not into the stitch line. Okay. And once you've got that all nice and trimmed, go ahead and return your hoop to the machine if you took it off like I did. And then you're going to go ahead and grab your next piece of fabric, which is your background. And I, again, am using the same background all the way through. And I have really enjoyed cutting it into these longer strips. It's been working out really well for me. But I've also got all these little weird random pieces that I've trimmed. So I'm going to be using some of those today. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to cover this inside area for the first piece of fabric that we put down. Then we are going to cover it, and we are going to put the raw edges of each piece of fabric up to one another. I like to make the top one supersede past that just by a little bit, just to make sure it catches everything. And we go all the way down to the edge of each part of our stitch lines. We smooth it down, tape if you need to, lower your foot and start. And it will sew all the way down the length of this piece of fabric. Once you're down the length, we're going to flip and fold and smooth it out. So we're going to just flip that over. We're going to smooth it down. And now it is going to do a stitch just to the side right here. And we're going to hit start, and we're going to sew. It does not do any stitching on the outside of the block until the very end. So I typically like to leave all of my overhang that is beyond the block, because I will trim that at the end. So I'm going to just nick this piece away, just up there to the side. And as you can see, I've just kept it smooth with the previous piece of fabric. Now it is going to come to the opposite side, right here. So again, we want to go into our previous piece of fabric we had laid down, which I have right here. So there's that. And then we're going to start, and we're going to sew it down. So this is machine stitch step 7 that we're currently on. We tack it down, and then again, we're just going to flip and fold. So I'm going to toss this bad boy over, and I'm going to smooth it down. And then I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to stitch out. Now, I just told you I normally do not trim the excess. Well, I had a bunch of these squares left over when I was cutting a bunch of this background fabric for this quilt that were about this size, just left over out of a piece. So I want to use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave myself a generous amount on the outside here. That way I know I don't have to worry about it. So if you have all these little weird Mod Podge pieces left over, no, you can use them. Just make sure that you're leaving yourself an amount at least 1/4 of an inch beyond your previous line of stitching, because that is where we're going to trim down from at the end of all this. I like to show different things and different ideas, so hopefully something works for you. And then we're just going to trim right here at the bottom stitch line. That's the only place you actually need to trim, and I just trim superseding off to the edge of the hoop. Now I'm going to lock my hoop back into place, and we're going to move on to the next step. So now the way that I have my block set up, the next color that's going to go down is my pink. And it is going to go right here. The first one is at the bottom. So I'm going to lay that down, and I want it to supersede beyond the edge of my hoop by at least a little bit. And I want it to supersede beyond the stitch line over here by just a little bit as well. And the reason I want it to supersede beyond both sides is because it's going to catch it here on the side and tack it down. And it is also going to need to hang over for when I cut it at the very end of all this. So now that I've got that, I'm going to flip it down just as before. That was machine stitch step 8 we just did, just so you guys know. And now we're about to do machine stitch step 9, which is going to tack it down. Again, we are staying in the same color. We have not changed a single thread. We've not done anything different. Ooh. I'm trying to press buttons on the machine, getting ahead of myself, y'all. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So as you can see here, it's done kind of a weird little scalloped style stitch. I'm going to bring this closer. So it's stitched here. I barely caught that. I was very lucky. Normally I would trim right here, but I can't trim anything. We're going to trim here. And yes, even though it's off to the outside of the hoop, we're going to trim here because there's actually a little piece of cream fabric that's going to go right there in that corner. So we're going to nick that away, and then we're going to get a piece of our cream, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. So I have this nice big long strip here, so I'm actually just going to nick a little piece of it off. That way I can leave my overhang and I'm not having to trim the excess and think about it here in a minute. But a piece, you know, this is about, I think, 3 inches wide, and this is probably about 3 inches. That'll be fine. Now, same thing as last time, we're going to take our piece and we are going to put it over top of our previous piece. We're going to lay that down over top of it, superseding just beyond it. We're going to lower our foot and hit start, and we are on to machine stitch step 11. Perfect. Then we're going to flip and fold it down and over, just like usual. And then we're going to do machine stitch step 12. And it's just going to sew a nice clean line right across the bottom. Now that we've got it up here, we can see where our stitch line is, and we are going to just trim from the bottom side all the way out, just extending to the edge of our fabric. if I can find my scissors. Haha, scissors. And I'm not a lefty, so I'm gonna mosey myself over here and trim that away. Wunderbar. Okay, perfect. So now that we have done the bottom, we are going to repeat that on to the side. So this is the bottom of our hoop, and now we're going to be on to the left side of our hoop. Repeating what we did before, just with a longer strip, we're going to put that down the side of our previously laid down pieces of fabric and putting this raw edge up against the raw edge of our previously sewn pieces. We're going to lay that down nice and smooth, and then we're going to sew, and this will be machine stitch step 13. Perfect. And just like every other step we've done, flip and fold. Smooth it out. And it's going to do that same kind of little weird angled stitch. And we're going to sew. And this is going to be machine stitch step 14. Okay, perfect. So same as the pink that we did at the bottom of the hoop, we're going to trim all the way around this. So at the bottom, then here at the side, and then up the angle. All right, awesome. Then I'm going to take the remaining piece of that little edge that I cut off, and I'm going to put it up here as well. So right here at the corner, just right here at the cusp, we're going to lay that down over top of our previous pieces of fabric, raw edges roughly up to each other, and then we're going to lower our foot and sew. And this will be machine stitch step 15. Perfect. We're going to flip it up. We're going to smooth it out, and it's going to do just like it did before. It's just going to sew one little straight line for us to trim our fabric. We'll lower it down and we'll begin sewing, and this is machine stitch step 16. So once you guys have done one or two flip and fold blocks, you kind of master it. It's a very, very smooth and easy technique. And if you're a person that does get confused about like fabric layout for this, I would always recommend kind of starting with a batik because they are so forgiving and so easy to work with. Okay, so just like we did the previous step with the pink, we're basically going to be repeating that same exact process, but this time with our orange or whatever colors you're using at home. So once again, we have a nice little clear defined area here to here. We put it in our previous stitching area, and we extend a little bit beyond the fabric and a little bit beyond the previous line of stitching just to make sure we're really good and centered in there. And then we lower our foot and start, and it's going to tack it down with machine stitch step 17. Wonderful. We're going to flip this over, and then we're going to sew once again. This will be machine stitch step 18, and this will tack down our piece of orange, and it's going to do the same stitch like it did on our two pieces of pink. Wonderful. So just like last time, we're going to trim the same exact way. We're going to knock off our little side piece. And I need to move this to where my body can actually reach the fabric. We trim at the bottom, and then we trim at the angle. And if you're not seeing this great right now, I apologize so dearly, but I cannot see my camera and trim this at the same time. So hopefully that wasn't too much of a hindrance on you. So I have that ready to go back in, And then I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm just going to cut myself a nice little piece off my strip so I can do both little corner pieces. But I still have a very good generous strip piece right here. Okay, so same thing as before. We are going to go over our previous pieced fabrics. We're going to lay that in the hoop, superseding beyond both points by just a smidge. And we're going to lower our foot and start. And this is machine stitch step 19, and that is just going to tack down our background fabric. Wonderful. So we're going to flip that back. Perfect. I'm going to smooth it out. I'm going to lower my foot and I'm going to let it stitch out. And the same thing as before, we're just going to trim right along this bottom line. I'm going to angle myself over here real quick and just snip that away. And again, I'm going out to the length of the fabric. Wonderful. Okay. Now we're going to grab another piece of pink, if I can find what I did with it. Not pink, orange. Another piece of orange, if I can find what I did with it. And we're going to take and we're going to do the same thing as we did last time. But this time we're just going down the other side. And just like you did with the pink, put it over the previous pieces of fabric. Line it up nice and smooth. And make sure it extends beyond the previous stitch points by just a smidge. Lower your foot, hit start, and you're going to stitch machine stitch step 21. Perfect. Awesome. So we're ready for the next one. So we're going to flip this on over. Wonderful. We're going to lower our foot and we're going to hit start and tack this piece of fabric down with machine stitch step 22. And just the same as it's been with the other three pieces, we're going to trim all three sides, all three raw edged sides, the bottom, the side, and the top angle. Wonderful. And then we're going to do another piece of the natural in the top corner. Wonderful. Now we are almost there. Once again, over top of the previously sewn pieces of fabric, you're going to lay it at an angle where the raw edges are. You're going to make sure it supersedes just a little bit just to be safe. Lower your foot and hit start, and we are on to machine stitch step 23. Wonderful. We're going to flip over once again. We're going to smooth it down, and then we are going to sew machine stitch step 24, and that is just going to do a nice straight line for us to trim away our excess background fabric. So we are almost done with the piecing. We've got 3 more pieces to go, and then we'll talk about changing threads. Okay, here we are. Cool beans, cool beans. So now we are going to add the 2 pieces of cream to the outside edge and to the bottom. So I'm going to start with my outside edge piece, and I don't think the piece I have here is long enough. Well, maybe. No. Moving on. So again, supersede beyond the edge of the fabric by just a little bit, and then lay over top of your previously sewn pieces of fabric. Lower your foot, hit start, and you are on to step 25. there are 35 steps in this particular block in total, but most of it is just, you know, you can see where you're flipping and you're folding. But we have not had to do a single color change, which is great. And of course, if you were using the optional Vanish Light thread as you go and Vanish Light bobbin, she does make notations of where you would use that in the instructions. And it's pretty much around the same place every time in the block, in each block. We flip over, and then we're going to sew machine stitch step 26, which is basically just going to put a little angled line here at the bottom. So I'm just going to trim from where it's stitched here and supersede beyond the fabric. Great, and I'm going to take what remains of my strip. I'm going to place it down. Just again superseding a little bit beyond both sides and laying it on top of the previously pieced fabrics. And then we're going to lower our foot and start, and we are on machine stitch step 27. Perfect. Then we're going to flip this forward, and we are going to sew machine stitch step 28. And that again is going to do the same thing it did last time. It's just going to sew a little angle line for you to trim the excess fabric away. Perfect. And then we're going to trim away. And now for those of us that are not adding the optional back piece to quilt through, this will be you will now grab your green, and this will be your last piece of fabric. For those of you that it's not, we'll talk about that in just a second. So now you're going to take your piece of green and you're going to put it over top of your previously sewn pieces of fabric, and you're going to line the raw edge of this piece where these two cream pieces were and the point of your oranges just right up over top of each other. And I like it to extend a little bit beyond my batting so I know I'm in the right place. And then we hit start and we stitch it out. Wonderful. Next thing, just like always, we're going to flip that over, and that was machine stitch step 30 for those of you that have been following along with me. Or was it 29? I'll find out. Here we go. Now, if you are doing the optional back, this is where you are going to switch to Vanish Light in the bobbin area. And the reason we would switch to Vanish Light here is because we would be taking our hoop off the machine. We would be flipping it over to the back side, and then we would be grabbing our fabric piece and we would be putting pretty side of fabric facing us, and we would be covering all these outside edge stitches and trying to supersede beyond that by a little bit. Then we would grab our embroidery tape, whatever your preferred brand is, and we would take our tape and we would tape in all the corners or down the lengths of each side, depending on what you're into. Now, I am not doing that for this block, so we are not, I just wanted to make a notation of where that would be, but you would put your Vanish Light thread in right now in your bobbin, and you would do that. Now, if you are not doing that, you could actually skip the step I'm about to do, but I would not recommend it because it's a whole heck of a lot easier to trim if you don't. So let's keep on a chugging. And for those of us that are doing this, I would also recommend tape if you have a hard time with the fabric getting caught in your foot, especially those of you that use the optional wool because of the thickness. I would recommend taking tape and kind of taping your edges down to kind of hold the fabric in place and to keep the foot from catching it as you sew along the edges. But we're going to go ahead and do this step, and it is going to give us our parameter outline. Wonderful. Okay. So now if you are wanting to quilt in a different color, you would go ahead and switch your threads. Also, that was machine stitch step 30 we just did. And so the one that we did a minute ago was 29, so I misspoke on that. My apologies. But if you're wanting to do a different quilting color and you're wanting your bobbin and top to match, now I would switch back to if you're doing the quilt as you go with the back added, you definitely need to take the vanish light out of the bobbin casing area. And if you had it in the top thread, take it out, switch to whatever you're quilting with. Switch to the bobbin and the top to whatever you're quilting with. If you were doing it block by block and where you're going to add the backing later like I'm doing with this project, then you would have your regular embroidery thread on top and your regular embroidery thread in the bobbin area, which is what I currently have. So again, that is all noted in the instructions, but I try to make a notation of that in all of our videos. So I am quilting with the same color that I piece with through the whole thing. That's my goal. I like to have as little color changes as possible. It makes my life easier, and I assume it makes your life easier. So now we are sewing machine stitch step 31, and that is going to do the quilting in the cream area. Now, if we are doing this and you want to be very OCD about it or just very keep it all the same, I would also recommend winding a little quarter bobbin of what color you're going to do with the purple, what color you're going to do with the pink, what color you're going to do with the orange, and what color you're going to do with the green if you are putting the back on, because you are going to be doing several color changes here in just a second. And if you have your back on here already and you got it taped to the back side, you will do several bobbin changes. So every time we change the color, if you have your back on and you want your colors to match, you will be changing your bobbin every single time we change our thread. And there are several thread changes in the next several steps. We are going to be changing the thread for each one of the colors that we currently have on. So if you notice that my cream thread is only quilting on my cream fabric, they did that on purpose because they're going to do like a cool little channel stitch outline quilting on each of these three pieces. So the purple, the pink, and the orange. And then in the green, it's going to do some pretty cute little straight line quilting on it. And we've got these little half feathers inside of all of our other pieces. And if you want to do your quilting all in the same color, that's you. This is your quilt. You do what makes you happy. I just try to make notations of anything that I think is very important for y'all to know. Okay, so we are at my first color change. So we are going to be taking off our cream thread, which again, I was using Exquisite Thread Color ES 165, and I'm going to be switching to my green thread, which is again another exquisite color. I am using Exquisite Color ES 983. So give me just a second to thread this back up. Okay. Now this is going to be machine stitch step 32, and it's just going to do a little bit of quilting in the green. Now remember, if you are wanting to match your back, if you have on the back piece, you would have had a little quarter bobbin wound to match that color if you wanted it to be exact. But again, this is your preference. And like I said, every time I change the colors, if you're doing that, you will change it so you'll have one of each of these colors. But it's just going to do a cute little straight line stitch out here. Okay, great. So we are done with the green. We're going to cut our threads, and it's going to move from the bottom up to the top. So now I'm going to switch to orange or pink or whatever. Color you're using. And then you're going to stitch it out. And this is machine stitch step 33. Perfect. Now we're going to switch to the next color, which in this block is pink. And then again, if you're changing bobbins, be sure to do that. And then we're going to switch to the next color, which in this case is pink, because like I said, it does move from the bottom up. We're going to thread the needle. We're going to start, and this is going to be machine stitch step 34. And so the last color is going to be our purple, and we will have it ready to go in just a second too. But I usually try to mention this. So the design that I have on is 7 3/4 by 7 3/4, and there are 5,665 stitches. It takes me at this machine speed that I'm set to on the Brother Avenir a grand total of 11 minutes to stitch out, not including the trim time and the flip and folding time and the color changes and all that good stuff. And there are 35 color changes in total. So I do want to point that out to y'all. Okay, so I think from start to finish of this video, it's going to take us like 45 minutes. So that's not a terrible amount of time. Okay, so again, cut your threads. I always recommend pulling it forward through the machine. I do not like you to pull it back. It causes problems that can be avoided. We're going to go ahead and thread the machine up. Switching to our last thread color. Oh my gosh. We're almost there. Do-do-do-do-do. There we go. Awesome. And this is machine stitch step 35. And as soon as this is done, you all are done. The only thing you will have to do once you're done is unhoop it. Take it over to your table, and depending on the way you're trimming, you're either going to be using their George Trimmer 2.0, which is what the Hoop Sisters recommends. I just use my regular ruler and trim it 1/4 of an inch from the previous edge. So as you can see, all I've done with this one, we just finished, all I've done is take this one over to my table, and I've trimmed 1/4 of an inch all the way around the previous line of stitching. And that's all you've got to do. So check me out for month 3, block 3. We'll be doing that soon. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Happy sewing. Bye-bye.